Sorry. Can you hear me now? Cool. Apologies, everyone. Hopefully, I've only just seen the messages coming through that people can't hear. But look, hopefully, yeah, you've kind of gathered me just thanking everyone, acknowledging country, kind of outlining what the network is and what the framework is. But look, what I'm just trying to say is if you can't stick around for the whole meeting, that's okay. It's going to be recorded. It'll be made available on the website. You can also get in touch with me after today. So in terms of the framework and update for everyone, so 76 councils have accessed the framework to date. So since April last year, 76 councils have accessed it in Australia. Over 500 people were involved in the consultation period last year, which has now led to the version I'm releasing today. Over 300 people have shown interest in the National WSUD Compliance Network, so the group that you're all here today as. And then, as I highlighted before, 7 organisations have provided in-principle support, with those being the Association, Stormwater New South Wales, Stormwater Queensland, the catchment group Cooks River Alliance, Frank Sydney, Stormwater 2030, and the companies Outland Stormwater and Optimal Stormwater. In terms of version 1 of the framework, there hasn't been too many major changes since the consultation draft last year. The major change is now that there is a new document that forms part of the structure of the framework, which is a starter guide, just to really provide that starting point for new users or people not familiar with the framework, just so they understand what the framework is, why it's important, and how to use it and what those different components do and how to use it. In terms of that starter guide, which is a new document that's part of this, basically a very short document. There's 4 pages within this document. There's an introduction, just really introducing the starter guide and the framework so people understand what they are, then looking at highlighting why that framework is important. Following that, there's the key tools and resources page, which is introducing the components of the framework, kind of giving you a definition and outline of what those different tools are. Following that, there is the page about using the framework to help users understand when and how to use the framework. And the final page is just really providing some direction of next steps of what councils can do or users can do once they're kind of read through this document, such as reaching out to me, coming to a network meeting, or just exploring and seeing how the framework can be usable for you. In terms of the guideline, this is the main component of the framework. There's been some changes to it, but the other components haven't changed too much, with the main changes being that to really emphasize that this framework is for private assets. The word private has now been chucked at the start of the document name. Some people raised that there was a little uncertainty at times whether this framework was applicable for private and public. While for me, I do see elements of this being usable for public, there is more of a focus on private assets. So that's why I've kind of gone with that. There's been slightly condensed this document from 80 pages to 75 pages, about half of the document being the 6 chapters, and then half of it being the appendices. Chapter 1 is introducing the topic and the guideline. The difference from the consultation draft is the section about the framework. Introducing the framework has been removed and put into the starter guide. And there's a little less information about the law in the introduction chapter and pushed into the appendices as Appendix A. And the next version of the framework we're looking to go into more depth about the law, about how to measure environmental harm, environmental nuisance, and all of that, and what the law says. Chapters 2 to 6 didn't change too much. It's really just outlining the different processes, activities, and decisions. Some wording was changed, a little bit was changed, and then just some updating for more current numbers for the current financial year. And then the appendices, there's 2 new appendices. There's Appendix A, which is about legal information, so summarized the law for all of the different states and territories in Australia. Most of that has been based off analysis done by lawyers. And then there's Appendix B, which is about guidance on implementing. People are interested in getting more information about how to implement the framework and implement a compliance program. So there's a few pages there just providing that guidance. And I will be looking in the next version of this framework to really go more in depth about implementation. There's content for the for development conditions. There's WSUD system agreements information, content for fact sheets and letters, and work activity reporting sheets. Some of the feedback was from the consultation draft was that the letters and fact sheets were sometimes a little too technical. So I've kind of reviewed that and simplified that a bit better for the general public so that when they're reading it, they understand what's going on rather than just telling them they have a WSUD system on their property. It just kind of breaks it down a bit better for better usability and readability. In terms of the process maps, not a major change with this. The main feedback on this was that the symbology was confusing. I was trying to use unified modeled language, which is the standard for process map symbology. However, instead of using the various different types, it's now for activities, 2 different shapes. There's the rectangle for activity and then kind of an oval, I think that's what that shape's called, for terminators, which is kind of the start or an end of a pathway. And so rather than having all of those different symbols, we've just gone with that. And the use of those symbols within the guideline has also been updated to reflect this. But otherwise, this hasn't really changed at all. The IMS is also something that wasn't really changed. There wasn't a lot of feedback on the IMS. I think people are still getting used to using it. And I have sat down with a few people to talk about it. However, there was just some minor changes in words and errors I found in it that I had to fix. In terms of maintenance schedule, no major changes from the consultation draft, besides from fixing a formatting issue when you added rows to the asset information slide and the work activity schedule page. And then also just a little few words added into the work activities section on page 2, which is just making it clear that council is the one to define what a suitably qualified person is that can do maintenance. Website changes, reflecting the changes that have been made with the framework and just kind of making it a little bit better to be used. The acknowledgements is now on the website. So in consultation draft, acknowledgements was in the guideline. And so as this is kind of like a living project and is going to continuously get feedback and input from a range of people, I realized it was more appropriate to have it on the website rather than in a guideline that's much harder to change. Also, a conflict of interest policy has been introduced. A few people are concerned around conflicts, whether it's about mine or other people's in this project. There is now a policy, which we'll get into soon. With that conflict of interest policy in place now, we swapped out a page around considerations, which was really just touching on kind of conflicts to simplify usability and management for me of this website. Rather than several different forms and fields on the website, there's now 3. There's the contact one on the contact page, which is really just to contact me if you have a question. There's the join network if you want to join, which all of you are part of. And then access framework, which is, pretty just the way you're accessing the framework. You fill that in, you get the email with access to the framework. And then looking to improve appearance and usability of the website. There's still, in my opinion, a lot more work I'd like to do to this website. I don't think it's perfect yet. However, that is something I'm going to be looking towards working on in the near future. And with that, working and bringing in actually someone that knows how to do a website, looking to improve and add some additional pages such as extra resources and a project roadmap so people can clearly see what the future of this project looks like. Conflict of interest policy, I did touch on this at the last network meeting in June. There's been a few additions to it since then. And so this is a draft policy available on the website, which is wsudcompliance.com.au/conflict-of-interest. And basically, I'd be keen to get people's feedback on this. But basically, there's an introduction kind of summarizing everything, outlines the purpose of the policy, the scope of the policy, outlines some definitions, goes through the general principles of the policy. It acknowledges ocean protects conflict. It acknowledges and describes my role as project lead and acknowledges my conflict and the controls for that. There's stuff about broader conflict management and additional conflict management controls. So looking at managing people at these network meetings and other ways that they're contributing. And then if you have issues or concerns around conflicts, how you can go about reporting that, and then how this policy will be reviewed. And then 2 tables added at the end about a conflict of interest register, just outlining all of the, I guess, in my opinion, active stakeholders or people that have been active and the organizations, so the in-principle supporters, the lawyers, myself, Ocean Protect, and anyone else that I could think of. If you think anyone's missing, please let me know. And then table 2 is really just outlining some of the other organizations in the industry that might also have conflicts with this project, really just providing a bit of clarity around I'm not the only one with conflicts, we all do have conflicts. And so, yeah, I'd be really keen to hear people's thoughts and opinion on this. There will be a survey that goes out after today's meeting where people can provide some comments and feedback on that anonymously if they want. So what has changed? So from the consultation draft to version 1, we've created a starter guide to help again with people starting to use the framework. The conflict of interest policy has been created. There's the new Appendix A and B, Appendix A being that legal summary, looking at all states and territories in Australia, and then Appendix B being the implementation guidance, which is just a few pages. And so basically, next version of the framework looking to really go in more depth about both of these. But for now, they're just kind of these small appendixes within the guideline. There's been the document name changes, so they're adding the word private to really emphasize that private focus. The guideline has been condensed, with most of that happening in chapter 1. Since the consultation draft was released, we had lawyers look at Tasmania and South Australia, so that has been incorporated into the framework. The symbology and language within the framework, such as in the process maps and the fact sheets and the letters, have been simplified. Acknowledgements have been moved from the guideline to the website. And there was a minor update to one of the clauses in the user license agreement, which is really just the names of the different components of the framework, so nothing really major there. But if you're interested in seeing the actual changes of everything, you can head to wsudcompliance.com.au/history, where there's a table that lists every time I'm making a change. And since there's a lot of change for this new version, I've actually linked a document there so you can see consultation draft versus version 1 and see any differences if that's of interest to you. Some other updates following that version is last week I held a workshop at the New South Wales Stormwater Conference where there were 8 attendees, which was great turnout for that sort of conference and workshop. And so I surveyed the group and asked them what are their concerns about the framework. I was curious to see what the feedback was. And basically, they could only choose one, which was an accident. It was supposed to be choose as many as you want, but the number one that was chosen was stakeholder resistance, which for me, I really think is about people lacking other stakeholders not really understanding what the benefits are of the framework, of compliance. And so that's something I'll try and look towards, trying to provide more information about how you can help everyone understand how it benefits them. One person also did raise project integration as concern. And again, I think that will be resolved once that implementation guidance is provided in more detail. They did have these were the options just listed here that they could choose from. So there was no concerns, resourcing required, it is missing something, stakeholder resistance, doesn't cover needs, complex and dense information, stakeholder involvement, project integration, and other. And so one person did choose other, but overall stakeholder resistance is that main concern from that group last week. In terms of another question I asked
Dan,
them, yep,
can I ask a question?
yeah,
Do you know what the other reason was?
I have that noted down. I can't remember it right now, but I will try
That's
and bring
okay.
that for the next network.
Yeah, cool. Ta.
Yep. I just realized my sound is being weird. Just a sec. Cool. Yeah. So yeah, I'll try to figure it out. I think, yeah, it might have just been that they didn't really know too much about the framework. There was someone who had never seen the framework before and interacted with it. So I want to maybe say it was them that had chosen other, but it's not guaranteed for me saying that. But in terms of barriers for a private WSUD maintenance compliance program, I gave them a bunch of options and had them rank it. And so just kind of showing the top 3 from that rank, with number 3 being competing priorities. So council's having a lot to do. And yeah, that's fair enough. I've worked in local government and see what it's like. And I'm sure a lot of you have either worked with government or in government. And yeah, there's a lot that they need to do. And so again, I think really helping people understand the benefits of doing such a program is a way to kind of help reduce other priorities getting more money, more resourcing than this sort of work. Number 2 was staffing. So amount of staff, staffing expertise, and kind of other staffing related issues. And so with that, I think the framework really comes in. It documents and collects a lot of knowledge and expertise into one place so that if people are continuously moving on different roles to different organizations and local government, that information is still captured and documented. But also the idea is, and I'll go into kind of some other parts of the workshop soon, but regardless of how much staffing you do have, this framework can still provide some sort of benefit to you. And if you're interested in that, happy to sit down with you and figure out what that is for you. And finally, not a surprise, was budget, so the money to implement such a program. But again, I do believe that the framework can work for you regardless of how much budget you have for this. And again, we can kind of talk about that soon. But for the workshop, it was a whole day workshop, so it went for what, 7 and a bit hours. And basically what I got was two groups. I got the room to split into two groups. One was a resource limited organization, was pretending to be that, while the other one was being a well-resourced organization. So basically one had nothing at all to use for this, while the other group had everything that they wanted to use for this to make this work for them. The co-host for this workshop was Dr. Andrew Thomas, who's the Vice President of Stormwater New South Wales. And so I got him to look after the Resource Limited organisation, and his group really went down more of an educational route for compliance. And so they were figuring out how they could use the framework for that, using the fact sheets, using the letters as the tool to drive compliance. And last week at the New South Wales conference, Kate Murphy, who's the Senior WSUD Compliance Officer at Blacktown Council, was talking about how just sending letters is helping them see a improvement in compliance. So an educational route is also a way about this. You don't necessarily have to be enforcing and issuing fines and doing compliance checks and all of that. You can just do education and see a little bit of an improvement. While I looked after the well-resourced organization, which was people wanting to bring in AI and automation to really simplify this and automate it so that there was less work for council, because a lot of this can just be managed by properties and their contractors submitting reports, documentation, photos. And then, it was just kind of do that, have a compliance officer who can do the stick side of this to enforce the compliance, and bring in a consultant to do some of the auditing for them where it got more technical, because again, they were well resourced, so they could afford that. Another thing to highlight last week was the Stormwater New South Wales Awards for Excellence. And so the framework won the Excellence in Policy Education. While this was given to me, I do want to say thank you to everyone that's been part of the journey for this project to date. You've all played a part, whether it's just coming to these meetings and listening, providing feedback, getting involved in, reviewing it, contributing your knowledge, expertise. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and say thank you to everyone for that. And thank you to Stormwater New South Wales, where Justine is there for the recognition, but also just highlighting that the framework was also a finalist in the asset management category and the research innovation category. So it's great to kind of see that the work that we're all doing is getting recognized. So thank you. So look, what's next with the framework? Continue to do more consultation and workshops and meetings. So I'm going to look to try replicate the workshop I did last week and maybe do that in some other states and territories, or even on that council level if there are councils interested about how to implement this. So sitting down and working through all the different components. Going to start working on version 2, which hopefully can be released next year, but it really just depends on workload, but really going in more depth about the law. So what the law says, how to measure environmental harm, what the size of penalties would be and all of that. That's something that I'm interested in doing and something I'll look to do, while also providing more in-depth guidance on how to actually implement the framework in a compliance program. And then also, look to improve the website. I've worked on it this year. I did have some initial website people doing it, but this year it was just me, and I'm not a website person, so I recognize it's not perfect, but looking to get that fixed up soon. But that is everything I kind of have to say. So I just wanted to open it up for Q&A if anyone had any questions, thoughts, or anything they wanted to say.
I have a question.
Yep,
I always have a question.
you do.
Also, hi.
Hi.
Nice to see you. Um, I just want to recognize how transparent you've been in this process. So well done to you. I think,
Thank you.
no one can say that you weren't transparent, or, you've invited people along the journey the whole way. So well done. For councils that are interested to trial or,
Yep.
start implementing straight away, what do they need to do?
Well, they have a few options, I guess, at the moment with that. They can either just access and download the framework for free from the website and basically run with that. They can either hire someone internally, like Blacktown Council, who has a compliance officer, or you could go the route of Parramatta River Catchment Group at the moment, which they initially hired a stormwater compliance and education officer who's now started a project and they're bringing in consultants to standardize WSUD compliance, kind of maintenance compliance across their catchment. And so you could look for consultants. Alternatively, I'm more than happy to sit down and workshop with you how it can work. So again, regardless of your situation, I'm sure I can find a way that you can get a benefit out of the framework. But yeah, I'd really just encourage you to have a look at the framework, look at the meetings, listen to what I've said today. But otherwise, yeah, reach out and I'm happy to sit down and help make this work for you.
Thank you. And I
All
have
right.
another question.
Yeah,
Can I ask another one?
go for it.
Um, so I think a lot of the conversations have been around councils and compliance and private WSUD assets. Has there been a any focus or any conversation with developers to try and bring something like this in at the developer handover kind of stage, or when people are actually buying a property, for example, right back at that very beginning stage?
So yeah, I would say that there is that opportunity for developers to get involved with this. I haven't done too much with developers on this. However, there is that whole initial, I might actually just go back to the slide about the process map. So there's a whole chapter around um, the development process, and then there's the process map, which is where those development conditions are being applied, when handover's happening, and all of that. And so I think there's the opportunity for councils to use that as a kind of bridge to interact and get WSUD compliance happening from that development stage. However, at the moment, I haven't really sat down with developers about this, but that is probably an avenue that we could go with this and see what they think of this rather than just staying in the stormwater space. We go out and outside of the
Hmm.
industry.
It'd be interesting just to see if they were open to conversation to start with, and then
Yeah.
maybe that starts the conversation more broadly within the industry. We keep saying that developer handover is something that needs to be, needs some attention. But yeah, maybe this
Mm.
is the beginning of that process.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see, yeah, if you get some traction in that space
Yeah. I can see what I can do.
in all
But
your
if
spare time. Yeah.
yeah, if there are any developers here today or listening or watching this later, happy to have a chat with you at some point and see how this aligns with the work that you're doing.
Thanks.
No worries. Um, is there any other questions from anyone?
Probably just more of a comment than anything. We were having a look at separate kinds of assets that are actually private assets, but
Yep.
council still needed to retain an interest
Yep.
in those for various reasons. I can certainly see an overlap here where if councils were able to plot these private systems in their GIS
Yep.
systems to actually have the data for these, even if they're not considered part of their own networks.
Yeah.
I think a process for that, I think, would actually go a long way to
Yep.
actually making sure that we understand what's out there in the industry, because it's going to be very, very difficult in the
Mm.
future to then try and backfill and try and find that data through all of the historic paperwork that we have to go through to try and find it. So because I sort of go between development assessment and asset management myself,
Yeah.
if we can come up with a system that works in house, I don't know if you've got other comparable sources where they're doing that at the moment, but I'm happy to
Yeah.
share, borrow, steal,
Yeah.
whatever's necessary.
Yeah, so I guess in terms of that, yeah, like fully agree. I think councils should be capturing this sort of data, whether you're actually even educating or doing enforcement. I think it's an important thing to capture because, yeah, it can help with a lot of planning and like figuring out where you should be putting public assets or maybe certain areas to target for educational or kind of advocacy sort of work. or where you might need to be doing some more cleanups, that sort of thing. So I think, yeah, putting that in GIS when I was at Blacktown Council as one of their WSUD compliance officers, as part of the development process, what was happening was the developer would come to me with a maintenance schedule, and I would be mapping out where those assets are, giving them an asset ID, listing out those attributes, model type, all of that. So that way I could always refer to that and figure out exactly where they were. So there was that kind of map being formed. And so that is something that councils can do and would provide, yeah, a lot of benefits, in my opinion, if that was happening. Cool. Anyone else have anything they would like to raise or say? Nope. Cool. Happy to kind of continue talking at the end, but happy for people to also get an early mark from this meeting if they would like. But look, just wrapping things up. The next network meeting will be in February. I see no point doing a meeting in December with the year wrapping up. Again, it's kind of happening every 2 months. So you can register for it right now from the website. You can scan that giant QR code and it will take you to the LinkedIn, to the Zoom page, and you can register there. Otherwise, you can learn more and stuff at the /network page on that website. Again, look, thank you all for coming along today. I'm happy to stick around and have a chat about anything else that people would like. However, if you have questions after today, you can email me, you can call me, you can go to wsudcompliance.com.au. The slides and recordings from today will be up there soon. There will be a wrap-up email coming out as well, maybe in a few days, just kind of providing direction to that as well if you missed it. There will also be a survey coming out if anyone wants to provide comments on this new version, or even that conflict of interest policy, as I'd be keen to kind of, yeah, get any thoughts on that. You can also connect with the framework on LinkedIn, where I provide some updates. Alternatively, yeah, you can access version 1 of the framework now on the website, and yeah, really keen to get some more input and feedback from anyone that has anything, but keen to kind of, yeah, continue working as a group on the next version and, yeah, seeing how we can all work together to improve WSUD compliance. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Dan.
All right.